Despite security concerns and criticism from his most conservative of followers, Pope Francis is preparing for his visit to Egypt. Catholics make up less than 1% of the population, but Pope Francis wants to strengthen dialogue between religions. He will meet with the Grand Imam of the world's most influential centre of Sunni Islamic teaching, as well as the head of the Coptic Orthodox Church. Speaking ahead of his visit, he said,
Auspico che sia anche un valido contributo al dialogo interreligioso.
I hope it may offer a valid contribution to interreligious dialogue with the Islamic world and to ecumenical dialogue with the venerated and beloved Coptic Orthodox Church.
Il nostro mondo
Our world, torn by blind violence, which has also afflicted the heart of your dear land, needs peace, love and mercy.
The
Vatican says the Pope is convinced that Christian-Muslim dialogue is more important than ever. However, the Pope's view is not shared by all Catholics. After a string of terrorist attacks on the country's Christians, some conservatives want no dialogue at all with Islam. During his 27 hours in Cairo, the Holy Father is meeting President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, which raised eyebrows among human rights activists. Asked if the Pope would question the president over the country's human rights record, the Vatican said that Pope Francis has made trips more delicate than this one. Security remains a priority, with the visit coming less than 3 weeks after dozens were killed in attacks against churches in Alexandria and Tanta, claimed by the Islamic State. Despite his vulnerability, Pope Francis has refused to appear in an armoured vehicle and will instead use a closed car so he can be closer to the people.
Pope Francis gave the very first papal TED Talk on Tuesday, and he had an important message for people in positions of power around the world.
E ti porta a fare del male a te stesso e agli altri, se non lo metti insieme all'umiltà e alla tenerezza.
During his speech, the Pope also emphasized that we all need each other, and the only way to build the future is to stand together. The Pope's talk was a surprise addition to the TED 2017 conference lineup, which included tennis star Serena Williams, World Bank President Jim Yong Kim, and journalist Gayle King. And it apparently took some convincing to get him to speak. The international curator who organized the Pope's talk told the Washington Post it took more than a year of asking and several trips to Rome to seal the deal.
Paying with cash could be a thing of the past. A study showed Wednesday that more than a third of Europeans and Americans would be happy to go without cash and rely on electronic forms of payment if they could, and at least 20% already do. The survey by ING bank website Easonomics was conducted across Europe, the US and Australia. A significant 34% of respondents in Europe and 38% in the US said they'd be willing to go cash-free permanently.
There tended to be more of a bent towards accepting cashless transactions amongst the countries at lower income levels. Romania, Turkey, for example, and to a degree Poland.
And cash is already getting less popular. More than half of the European respondents said they'd used less cash in the past 12 months than previously, and 78% said they expected to use it even less over the coming 12 months.
United States President Donald Trump is now talking about making his first official visit to the Jewish state this coming May. The discussions come through alleged plans to extend his European tour, and his Israel visit would be scheduled to coincide with Jerusalem reunification celebrations. If Trump does indeed arrive around May 21st or the following days as planned, however, it would also be the perfect moment to discuss his campaign promise to move the United States Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and officially recognize the Holy City as the undivided capital of the Jewish state. Congress passed a motion to officially move the embassy back in 1995, but every president since then has signed executive orders every 6 months to postpone the move. Trump, unlike his predecessors, didn't only speak about the move either, though. His appointed ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, is also a pro-settlement, pro-embassy move supporter. After speaking with Palestinian officials, however, the planned move seemed to have stalled. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas said that making such a move would, quote, destroy the prospects of any political process and would open the gates of hell in the region and in the whole world, end quote.
Large explosion has been reported near the airport in Syria's capital, Damascus. Activists have posted a video that they say shows what happened. The cause of the explosion isn't yet known, and there are conflicting reports as to whether it was an Israeli airstrike or an attack by rebels.
What we have heard is that in the early hours of the morning there were five attacks, and they jolted residents across Damascus awake. They were very large. We can see on Iranian-based press TV actual footage of fires in the night. It was at the airport, at what is being described as a military arms supply depot that is used by Iranians to bring in weapons and to take out weapons. So commercial and military planes leave from there with weapons for Iran, for Hezbollah, and also, of course, within Syria itself.
So assuming it was Israel that carried out these strikes, perhaps it's not surprising?
Yes, officially Israel doesn't confirm or deny, and when we ring the Israeli Defense Force spokesperson, that's what they say. But we have had, uncharacteristically, a response from the Israeli intelligence minister this morning, who says this would be consistent with Israel's aims of not allowing Hezbollah to have weapons on Israel's border. And we heard that also from Israel's defense minister today, who's in Moscow, and he said something, the same kind of statement to reporters there. So Israel almost stepping up to say that it will not allow its enemy Hezbollah, the ally of Iran and of Syria, to have weapons on the border. And if it sees those weapons, it will attack them.
North Korea is sure acting like they're ready for war. They fired hundreds of rockets and torpedoes at mock warships on Tuesday, its largest live-fire artillery drill ever. When it comes to North Korea, these things tend to land on significant dates. This time, the drill marked the 85th anniversary of the creation of the North Korean army. And of course, Kim Jong-un made himself seen by state media. He saluted his military as he watched the exercises. The next day, the U.S. and South Korea had their own answer. They did their own live-fire drills near the North Korean border. The back and forth comes as tensions continue to rise between the North and the U.S. President Donald Trump has gone after North Korea in the last couple of days. He spoke with the United Nations Security Council on Monday.
The status quo in North Korea is also unacceptable. This is a real threat to the world, whether we want to talk about it or not.
A senior analyst at the Brookings Institution told CBS the constant threats could cause a, quote, needless stumble into war.
One pointed message after another from the U.S. and its two allies to Pyongyang. On Wednesday, the South Korean and U.S. militaries held a combined firing drill in Pocheon, about 60 kilometers northeast of Seoul. Pocheon is located near the demilitarized zone that separates the two Koreas. Dozens of tanks, rocket launchers, and fighter jets were seen during the live-fire exercises. This was the third one this month, and it came only a day after the DPRK held one of its own. Meanwhile, South Korea also dispatched a frigate and submarine to join maritime training exercise in waters south of the Korean peninsula. It will also acquire two advanced early warning radars called Green Pine to detect ballistic missiles from the north later this year. Heading for the Korean peninsula, the U.S. aircraft carrier strike group Carl Vinson on Thursday was joined by Japan's air self-defense forces for a joint exercise in waters south of Japan. It follows two-day exercises with two Japanese destroyers as the Vinson passed through the Philippine Sea. The U.S. Navy says the two exercises demonstrate the ability of the U.S. and Japan to respond quickly to threats in the region.
Anti-US demonstrations in South Korea turn violent. They're protesting against a controversial US missile defense system, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, or THAAD. Key components were installed in the early hours of Tuesday morning, and already many people want them removed.
The South Korean and United States authorities sneaked THAAD radar and launching equipment into Suseong-ri Golf Course by trampling on protesting residents. This situation was so unbelievable to me, and so we held this news conference opposing the third installment.
The US says THAAD, which can intercept ballistic missiles, will be an effective deterrent against North Korea's nuclear ambitions. But South Korea's political opposition say there's been no proper consultation and that the country has been marginalised in recent talks. It also says the US's deployment of an aircraft carrier fleet and nuclear submarines to the already volatile region will cause further destabilisation.
The U.S. Air Force tested an unarmed intercontinental ballistic missile early Wednesday morning in California. The Minuteman III missiles are tested about 4 times a year. The last one occurred in February. The launches ensure the missiles are still operating properly, and they show off the country's nuclear capabilities. Wednesday's test just so happens to coincide with rising tensions over North Korea's recent missile tests.
It sure looked like an amphibious assault today on the beaches of Southern California as Marines tested the weapons of future warfare.
The first wave in the war of the future could begin with armed robots and drones that deliver bombs and supplies before the boots ever hit the beach. And Corporal Edmund Kennedy is happy to let machines lead the way.
Better to have this thing be the first on the beach than you.
Absolutely, sir. I don't like being shot at, and I don't think any Marine likes being shot at, but if this could take the brunt of the assault, I think that's a great idea.
The combination of Marines and machines is being showcased in a series of simulated amphibious assaults that includes swarming underwater drones surreptitiously mapping out the shoreline. Colonel Dan Sullivan.
Now even a primitive adversary like ISIS is flying UAVs with explosive charges on them.
So the pressure's on.
The pressure's on.
But putting so much faith in autonomous devices raises concerns over hacking.
This is being designed with the cyber threat in mind. That is at the heart of this. And quite frankly, offensive cyber too. We've got to be able to attack his network while protecting our own.
The first of its kind task force is exploring new inventions like this speedboat that turns into a submarine and a lethal unmanned jet ski. Navy Captain Chris Mercer is co-hosting the event.
This feels a little bit like the Consumer Electronics Show for the Navy and Marines.
Yes, very, very much so, except for in this case, the judges are the Marines and the sailors.
Can a Lance Corporal come up and say, you know, sir, I really don't like this. I think you should change this.
Yes, they already have.
Much of the new equipment is operated by remote control and is almost like playing a video game. Corporal Kennedy agrees.
Did you ever think that you would be able to bring those video gaming skills to the job?
Not in a million years. My mother told me it was a waste of time, but look at me now, Mom.
On Wednesday, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu called the U.S. missile strike on a Syrian air base earlier this month a threat to Russian troops and declared that Moscow would take extra measures to protect their soldiers. At a security conference in Moscow, Shoigu restated Russia's view that the strike, which Washington conducted in response to what it said was a deadly chemical weapons attack by Syrian government forces, was a crude violation of international law. U.S. officials said before launching the strike that they had warned Russian forces and no Russian personnel were injured in the attack. However, Shoigu said Washington's action created a threat to the lives of our servicemen who are fighting against terrorism in Syria. Such steps are forcing us to take extra measures to ensure the safety of Russian forces. Shoigu did not specify what those measures would entail.
The U.S. Air Force's newest and most advanced jet landed in Estonia for the first time on Tuesday, amid heightened tensions between Russia and the U.S. On April 25th, 2 F-35As landed at Amari Air Base, a move meant to reinforce the U.S.'s commitment to the defense of NATO allies that border Russia. Estonia, a former Soviet republic, shares an almost 200-mile-long border with Russia. Estonia's Defense Minister Margus Tsahkna said that the arrival of the F-35 sends a very clear message, adding, quote, "The United States is taking the show of unity very seriously." The F-35s are the latest show of what's known as the European Reassurance Initiative, an effort implemented by the Obama administration to ease Eastern European allies after Russia's annexation of Crimea. The aircraft are scheduled to spend several weeks in Europe training with other NATO military aircraft.
Weapons from a NATO member state have ended up in the hands of jihadists in Syria. That's according to an investigation carried out by a Bulgarian journalist.
This is a weapons warehouse reportedly owned by al-Nusra fighters in eastern Aleppo. And when that part of the city was liberated from terrorist control in December, Bulgarian journalist Dilyana Gatensieva saw something she didn't expect to see there.
There were 9 warehouses full of heavy weapons with the country of origin Bulgaria. There were 2 million shells and 4,000 red rockets, which had somehow ended up in the hands of the jihadists.
On a mission to find out how Bulgarian weapons ended up in Syria, Gatensieva not only traced them back to its manufacturer, VMC, she figured out where the weapons were being shipped to before reaching Syria.
My sources told me that there are regular supplies of weapons through Black Sea to Saudi Arabia, so I knew exactly which vessel is carrying the weapons.
According to nautical tracking website marinetraffic.com, Marian Danica is classified as a Hazard A ship, meaning its cargo contained weapons and explosives. And based on satellite data, the vessel travels between Burgas and the Saudi city of Jeddah regularly. Saudi Arabia, a U.S. ally, has long denied providing al-Nusra with any direct assistance. But it does, along with other allies, support the so-called moderate opposition group, the Free Syrian Army. According to Free Syrian Army Commander Malik al-Qardi, the US, UK, France, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar control the distribution of arms amongst different factions of the opposition. He says the FSA's share of the shipment is often minimal, as the weapons end up in the hands of radical groups.
According to an arms monitoring group on Wednesday, Islamic State militants have developed an improvised explosive device that can be launched from rifles or dropped from an aerial drone. The report by Conflict Armament Research claims that the Sunni militant group was promoting the development of own-brand weapons to provide its insurgents with otherwise unavailable armaments. Iraqi forces launched a sweeping U.S.-backed offensive in October to retake the city, Islamic State's last major urban stronghold in Iraq. CAR, which identifies and tracks arms and ammunition in war zones, reported in December that IS had been making weapons on a scale and sophistication matching national military forces.
Construction sites might one day be buzzing with robots. Researchers are developing autonomous construction systems that can assemble or even 3D print any structure imaginable. Their latest success, a robot from MIT that recently achieved the world's largest, fastest 3D print job. It built a 12-foot dome out of insulation foam in just 13 hours using power from only batteries and the sun. Robotic construction has come a long way in recent years. Autonomous drones circle construction sites, giving builders a bird's-eye view of the progress. The semi-automated mason, or SAM, robot can lay up to 1,200 bricks a day. But some robots can even print entire houses in a matter of days, making construction more cost-effective and efficient than relying solely on manpower. But while there is growing concern that robots are removing jobs from the workforce, we're still a long way from becoming fully reliant on robotic construction. Robots still have a hard time moving around and adjusting to a highly varied environment, like a construction site. And 3D printed objects aren't as strong as traditional ones. We haven't proved them in everyday use, let alone in extreme conditions like earthquakes and storms. In the near future, most industry experts expect robots and humans will work together. Robots will handle the monotonous tasks, while humans tackle the tricky stuff.
These Brazilians are demanding more land rights. They say loggers and farmers are intruding on land that is rightfully theirs. thousands of indigenous people gathered to march to Congress.
There are evangelical representatives who get together with pro-agribusiness representatives to destroy our rights. They want to transform Brazil into a huge granary and put an end to this country's biodiversity.
Some protesters were armed with bows and arrows. Others chose to carry coffins on their backs, symbolizing the number of indigenous people murdered while fighting for their rights. Campaigners say so far this year there have been 13 deaths related to land conflicts in Brazil.
These coffins represent all the indigenous people from our 305 ethnic groups who have died over the past years as a consequence of this evangelical and ruralist influence in politics.
But the protests soon turned violent. Police say they had to use force when protesters were getting too close to the congressional building. Some indigenous protesters say they plan to stay all week. They claim the government is trying to roll back their protections across the Amazon.
Hundreds of French police officers have taken to the streets to call for better protection and working conditions. France has lived under a state of emergency since 2015 following a series of terrorist attacks, and officers demonstrating say they want France's next president to do more for them. We haven't had recognition for the work we do and the risk we face. The risks are there. They've multiplied between the Kouachi case and the Bataclan, etc. And last week, unfortunately, our colleague, this man says. The march comes almost a week after a gunman shot and killed a policeman on the Champs-Élysées boulevard in Paris, the latest in a series of attacks claimed by the Islamic State militant group.
There have been more violent clashes in the Venezuelan capital Caracas as weeks of political turmoil continue. The number of people killed in the past few weeks has now reached 29. Opponents of the Venezuelan government have been taken to the streets over what they see as anti-democratic policies of the administration of Nicolas Maduro. They're now calling for an immediate presidential election. More than 400 people have been injured and nearly 1,300 detained.
Deadly storms dumped more than 8 inches of rain on the city of Raleigh, the capital of North Carolina. Swollen rivers caused some of the worst flooding since Hurricane Matthew.
Torrential rain across central North Carolina sent creeks over their banks on Tuesday, triggering major flooding across the region. Water surrounded entire neighborhoods, and rescuers had to use rafts to help people and pets get to safety.
I got ready for work and got out, and then they called and said we had to evacuate.
Dozens of roads quickly became impassable, and drivers were ordered onto detours. Those who risked navigating the flooded streets became stranded.
I see an incredible sight. It really is terrifying, the power of something like that.
All right, here's our local school buses going across the washed out road.
A Brunswick County school bus driver was fired after driving through a flooded road that had been closed to traffic.
This is a genius.
Front lawns and backyards across the Carolinas were submerged, leaving some homeowners feeling helpless.
Never seen it like that before. I think a lot of water just converges all in one place at one time, and there's no place for it to go here.
Some residents are dismayed by these latest floods. They say they're still fixing all the damage left by Hurricane Matthew just 6 months ago.
Just overwhelming. I mean, it's home and there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, just hope for the best and pray.
Police officers in upstate New York pitched in to help a man who they say is down on his luck. The Rome Police Department says the man named Bobby was hanging out in the city's downtown area when he ran into Officer Aaron Page. Bobby told the officer how much he wanted a hot shower and a haircut. Officer Page could see he was in need, so he told him to come to the precinct the next day. Some other kind cops were also there waiting to help Bobby. They gave him a place to shower and some clean clothes to put on after. Then they gave him a much-needed haircut and a shave. They say Bobby couldn't thank the officers enough for helping him look and feel like a new man.